In 2018, the IRS froze Natasha Smick's $7,300 tax refund with no explanation. Now, Natasha was pregnant with her second child, she had a toddler at home, she was working toward her bachelor's degree, and she was relying on the refund to pay down her credit card debt. But her $7,300 remained in the government's bank account. At first, the IRS told Natasha she simply needed to wait. She called for updates. They told her to be patient. They were just reviewing her return. Until months later, when the IRS sent her an audit and magnanimously gave 30 days to provide supporting documentation for everything. Pay stubs, proof of address, pediatric bills, birth certificates, social security cards, medical records, her marriage certificate. By this point, Natasha had given birth. So postpartum, she scrambled to collect the docs before the deadline, and the IRS said, "We'll get back to you in 6 months." 14 months later, they responded. "Okay, yeah, we do owe you about $7,000, but you couldn't prove something in your audit, so we're keeping $350. Natasha couldn't afford to contest it, and that was that. That's a frustrating story, right? Natasha wasn't hiding offshore accounts or running a carried interest shell game. She reported about $33,000 in income. A low-income family reported their taxes based on the IRS's own audit, at worst, mostly correctly, and still got investigated and had their refund held for over a year. And that's not an uncommon occurrence. I mean, if filing taxes hasn't enraged you, you either can read in the dark or pay a really good accountant. But not many know the reasons our system is a convoluted nightmare, so in this video we'll discuss why, when the government already knows what you owe, you spend hundreds of dollars and a dozen hours every year to make software companies billions of dollars. So why do we file taxes at all? I mean, none of my friends did, and now they get free meals. And sure, the uber wealthy can use loopholes, like Jeff Bezos claiming a $4,000 tax credit when he was worth $18 billion, and that must feel cool, but think about it. For most people, the government already knows what you owe. Your employer reports your wages to the IRS. Your bank reports your interests. Your brokerage reports your dividends and capital gains. The payment processor for your small business reports your sales. In fact, the government receives this information before you do. They could simply send you a letter telling you what you owe or what they owe you and be done with it. Instead, you play a game where you and the IRS have to say the amount you owe on 3, and if you get it wrong, you get audited. The government sits with your completed return, then waits like a vengeful chemistry teacher with the answer sheet hoping you make significant figure mistakes. But there must be some reason we don't pre-populate personal income tax returns, right? Surely the US wouldn't implement some dumbass system to the detriment of its citizens without a good cause. Well, as of 2021, over 45 countries at least partially pre-populate tax returns, with some returns taking less than 5 minutes to finalize. T.R. Reid, author of this book, wrote about being in the Netherlands with an executive who made $200,000, had 2 mortgages and many investments. In America, this guy'd need at least 12 forms and 6 whiskeys to finish filing. In the Netherlands, the government filled out his taxes for him. He went online, clicked OK, and it took 5 minutes. Well, so what? Who knows what their tax code looks like? Maybe they have super simple tax laws. But our complicated tax code doesn't necessitate a W-2 employee paying $300 to fill in boxes the government already has. Look at Japan. They don't have a super simple tax code, but for most workers, the Japanese government sends a postcard with all their return information and just deposits their refund into their bank account. Meanwhile, the average American spends $290 and 13 hours filing taxes annually. I mean, if we put those billions of man-hours towards something productive every year, I don't know, maybe our kids would still be able to read. So, why doesn't America do what many wealthy countries did long ago and make tax filing free and simple for most citizens? Are you familiar with Intuit, the maker of TurboTax, or H&R Block? They're 2 of the biggest tax preparation software players in the industry, and in 2002, they approached the IRS with an offer. The IRS was thinking about building a government filing tool that pre-fills returns and makes filing free and easy for most Americans, which obviously would have hurt TurboTax and H&R Block's businesses. And these companies said, listen, we'll do it for you. We'll create a free filing option for low-income Americans. We have the experience. We know how to make it good. And in return, we're only asking for one little thing. Too insignificant to even mention, really. But since we're doing you this huge favor, how about you promise not to build a competing tool of your own? It's not like citizens will even need it, right? The IRS agreed. And this arrangement was called the Free File Alliance. Now, this tool technically covered 70% of American taxpayers, but less than 2% of filers actually used it, which is odd, right? If 70% of people had a tool to file freely and easily, would you expect barely anyone to utilize it? Well, according to investigations from ProPublica, Intuit carefully ensured not only that people couldn't find such a tool, but that they were corralled into paid options instead. Here's how. If you Googled IRS free tax filing, you'd find TurboTax Free Edition, an Intuit product that was seldom free, and you'd never find TurboTax Freedom Edition, the actually free tool, because Intuit coded the Freedom Edition not to be indexed in search results. Confused? Good. That was the point. TurboTax Free Edition was a product designed to appear free, then introduce a paywall after you'd already entered your information. If you've ever started a TurboTax return at the screen that says like, oh, it'll be free to maybe $99, but certainly no more, then somehow end up with like a $400 bill right at the end, this should come as no surprise. A former developer said, there's a lot of desperation. People will agree, will click, will do anything to file. Isn't that blatantly false advertising, though? Well, theoretically, someone with the simplest return possible could use TurboTax Free Edition for free, but that never happened. There was always some reason that, oops, actually you don't qualify for the free version, but you're basically already done, and the deadline is next week, so why not just pay the fee? Now, the program they promised the IRS was called TurboTax Freedom Edition. It never showed up on search, and eligible customers were funneled into paid products instead, which, once they selected, they were locked into. When ProPublica reported this, the CEO of Intuit defended the company's actions, saying hiding the free option was done, quote, in the best interest of taxpayers, so they were more fully informed about their options. That's actually the same reason I launched fireworks at my neighbor's lemonade stand as a kid. I just wanted customers to know they had the option to go to mine. So when this news came out, you'd imagine TurboTax faced consequences, right? Sort of. In 2022, Intuit settled with all 50 states for $141 million, which means deceived taxpayers got like, what, $30? And TurboTax alone makes over $4 billion a year. So that settlement was 3.5% of a single year's revenue. Basically a rounding error. Okay, so we have a government that promised not to build a competing free filing tool and a private company that hid the free option from search engines and designed a product to extract money from people who qualified for free filing. So what the hell is the IRS doing? Aren't they the ones who got us into this mess to begin with? A lot of people understandably detest the IRS, but you might hate it for the wrong reasons. On paper, the IRS gives the government a massive return on investment. In 2024, it collected about $5 trillion in revenue on a budget of about $12 billion. So where does that money come from? Well, taxes, of course. And hey, the IRS made $350 off Natasha Smith, right? But is it just auditing low-income families with credit card debt? Believe it or not, no. Auditing the bottom half of taxpayers, the IRS more or less breaks even. But for every dollar spent auditing the top 10% of earners, the government gets $12 back. And those tax earnings last a decade. When the IRS tells wealthy people you can't claim this, they tend not to for the next 10 years. Think of it this way. The US government has a machine that prints money for every dollar it puts in, especially when aimed at high-income filers. So, what did it do with this information? It defunded the machine, which translated to a massive tax cut for the wealthy. Over a decade, IRS staff responsible for audits dropped by a third, IRS budgets got cut, audit rates for millionaires fell, while audit rates for low-income households stayed the same, or rose. Because the more complex you're filing, the more resources the IRS needs, and the less likely you are to be audited. A billionaire has an army of lawyers ready to fight their audits. Someone making under $20,000 does not. Senator Ron Wyden has a quote on this. While the wealthy now have an open invitation to cheat, low-income taxpayers are receiving heightened scrutiny because they can be audited far more easily. All it takes is a letter instead of a team of investigators and lawyers. So if you're looking for quick wins with limited resources, you don't go after Larry Ellison, you go after Natasha Smith, who, by the way, filed with TurboTax. Our tax complexity is a moat that protects the wealthy, and an underfunded IRS just makes that moat deeper. It doesn't mean you can get away with not paying taxes. It helps high-income earners and companies like TurboTax, and they lobby the government to keep it that way. So, since Intuit didn't really resolve the IRS's free tax filing program, couldn't the government just create the program they were thinking about in 2002 and promised not to? Well, by 2021, TurboTax and H&R Block had left the Free File Alliance. I mean, news of hiding the actually free filing option broke in 2019, so why even bother pretending, right? And since they were the two largest members of the Free File Alliance, pressure for the IRS to develop its own free program grew. And in 2024, the government launched a free tool called Direct File. In completely unrelated news, Intuit and H&R Block spent a combined record $7.1 million lobbying in 2025, the highest annual total ever, and the government's Direct File program was shut down that year. What a propitious coincidence for them. I mean, if you were upset that Intuit only had to pay $141 million in its settlement, only $7.1 million to buy politicians is like an insult. You couldn't even make it 8 figures? In fact, these two companies have only spent a combined $103 million lobbying the federal government since 2003. And I say, let's at least make our politicians worth more. If you reduce running a business to its core, you could say it's about providing a solution to an urgent need. But there are issues with that, right? I mean, what if the need goes away, or changes, or shrinks? It would be much more convenient to create and control a need. And that's TurboTax's value proposition. We help you navigate a complicated process that our lobbying ensures will never become simplified. So the next time you're on TurboTax, 10 hours in, too far to quit, about to pay $300 for something that should have been free, well, I don't know, it'll still suck, but at least now you'll know who to be angry at. I recommend you watch this video next as a palate cleanse, but before you click off, subscribe and it'd make my day. See you next time.